It just seems that when people come to the park, we just immediately know that this place is a special place and really in the world. It's
for a park person like me, and I've been lucky to be involved in so many projects. The fun of it is the satisfaction in it. It's not what you do or what you get credit. To me, that's meaningless. It's like when I'm sitting here right now and I see something that I remember from 50 years ago, and I see the visitors enjoying their day, having a great time, having an experience that they will remember, their families will remember, whether it's having a picnic or crabbing or whatever it might be. That is the fun of it. And I'm sure you have the same feeling. That's the fun.
Right.
You start something and it looks like it can't happen. It's impossible. Everybody tells you can't do it. And then all of a sudden something happens. And you find a champion, Helen Fensky, Richard Sullivan, Sam Pessin, your dad, Audrey Zapp. Someone comes along and breaks through that logjam. And so instead of getting a hotel or more townhouses, you get a park. And when you come back and see it, the emotional feeling that a park person like me gets from doing this for so long, it's an unbelievable experience to see the good that can come and how people can be helped by government. My first impression was not really a happy impression because I was running Cheesequake State Park and I had about 5 or 6 other out areas. And they assigned this to me. I got a call one day and then a memo followed up saying, Bill, you're going to be in charge of the new park, Liberty State Park. And I was a guy from rural America. My family were farmers. And I thought, well, where is that? So I came up here with the person who was in charge of the leases at that time. And I looked at the park and I thought, oh my God. What am I going to do with this? This is hopeless. I looked at all these industrial things and the McMyler dumper and the railroad yards and the terminal building was a mess. And my whole attitude changed over the evolution of the development of the park and seeing, as I got involved with it more, what could happen. And being here now, I mean, for me today, it was an emotional experience. So I'm going around the park, I'm watching all the joggers, I'm seeing birds everywhere. I look at the cove, which I was involved in saving the marsh here, that was going to be filled in, and looking at the geese and the ducks out there and seeing all these people, they're everywhere. And I have a feeling that's just, it's hard to describe how I feel about this right now.
You mentioned that you were at some planning meetings, and so if you would talk about how the early decision process, and then you mentioned about there was a revelation one day.
Yes. Well, when I first got here, I didn't have an idea about how the park should go. But when I'm looking around, I'm seeing the Statue of Liberty, I'm looking at Ellis Island, and I walked into the 1889 Central Railroad Terminal, and I thought, oh my goodness, these are unbelievable national themes. And then I started to spend more time here and I started to see the incredible wildlife resource. I was over in Cave and Cove, right over here one day. We were up here doing a seining thing, looking at the resources in Cave and Cove. There were thousands of red-headed and canvasback ducks. And it was a roar. Before we got to where we could see them, we heard this roar of all these ducks feeding and flying in and out. And then there were ducks on the river, and there were pheasants, and there were songbirds. And I thought, and I love wildlife. I mean, that's probably my main interest. And I looked at this wildlife resource and I thought, what an unbelievable combination of transportation themes, the history themes, immigration, liberty, and wildlife and recreation, and what a resource this could be. So there was no one but me. I was only here. Myself and David Carroll were the only 2 employees. There was no employees.
And what was David's role?
David was the ranger. He was in charge of enforcement by himself, which was a kind of a hopeless thing. One of my first experiences was I went to the terminal building and there was a drug addict up there stripping copper off the roof. And then another day I went up there and there used to be a bus down Johnson Avenue, and there was a body at the end of Johnson Avenue, and people are getting off the bus and walking around the body. And I thought, this is like a very strange place.
It was a dead body?
There was a dead body laying there. People were just getting off the bus and walking around the body. And because the coroner had put a blanket over it, but the wind blew the blanket off. So we're working on the roof, and here's the spot here. And the people are pretending like, it's like a normal thing. I was invited to a meeting, and we were having the meetings in the top tower of the World Trade Center, because the first planner was really the Port Authority and the Army Corps of Engineers. They were the ones that originally did some of the cleanup and getting it started. The state paid them $750,000 to do that. I remember that. So I'm a kid from rural Delaware. I'm sitting on the top floor of the World Trade Center thinking, what in the world am I doing here myself? There's like 30 people there, all the different officials from the Port Authority. And then one day I'm invited to a meeting, and you never know what's going to happen. It's over here on one of these piers. I'm with Richard Sullivan and Russell Cookingham, who was the director of the Division of Fish, Game, and Wildlife. And I knew Richard Sullivan, and I knew his reputation. He was the first DEP commissioner, and he was an incredible person. And we're talking about the plan, and all these crabbers and fishermen are gone by. There's a parade of people gone to the river. There were no facilities then, but they were going out on these piers, and they were going out where they could get to the water with their crab pots and their fishing rods. And we're watching this, and Russell Cookingham was a fisheries wildlife guy. So Richard looks at this and he goes, "We're not doing this plan." That's just what he said. He says, "We're not doing this." He said, "This is going to be, we're going to connect this park to the people of Jersey City. We're going to connect this to the city." And that's when the vision changed. And then the whole thing just went in a whole different direction.
That was so telling, being at the right place at the right time, that you indicate that Richard Sullivan and you and the others.
Richard. Richard was really the person that I had no authority to do anything, but Richard did. He was the commissioner. The plan began to evolve with Richard being really the leader of it. I played a small part, but I had a background in wildlife and parks, and I had visited parks all over the place. So I'd like what's happened here. I'm really excited about. I think it's just great.
And I think over 300 species of birds have been cited. But for you to realize the beginning of the dramatic recovery of nature in this abandoned rail yards, that must have been stunning for you to see the juxtaposition of the decaying piers, the abandoned rail yards, and nature coming back.
The irony of it was this abandoned railroad yards, which I think Central Jersey had abandoned it, I think it was 67, they moved out. So this all came up in grasslands, which became a perfect habitat. Every time I had a chance, I would talk about the wildlife resource. I said, look at all the waterfowl here. Look at the hawks and the owls that are cruising over these meadows, feeding on the mice that are all over the place. And look at these pheasants. The crabbers and the fishermen, mostly on this end, because they could walk out on the piers. I think there were 3 piers. And there was an operation out here to salvage minesweepers. So there was quite a bit here. And this whole area in here was sunken barges and tugboats. This was a place where if you had a derelict boat, you would dump it here. So it was kind of a mess, but it made great habitat for fish and crabs. Ah. So there were a lot of fishermen down here. So that's what I remember. And I met Paul Jordan here a few times. He was the mayor of Jersey City at that time. He was another really strong park supporter.
Right.
And as you know, the first donation to the park came from Jersey City.
Yes.
Yeah, they donated money. So he was a really early supporter of Liberty Park.
I think it was maybe about 150 acres in 1965 that Jersey City donated for the future park. And a story is that President Johnson, when he was at Ellis Island, saying that Ellis Island would be part of the Statue of Liberty National Monument, that LBJ turned around and said, "And behind me here, the Jersey City coast, will rise a great park." So that gave a little
I didn't know that.
impetus to the park also. Did you want to, we're going to talk about this original side of the park. I think it was about 35 acres.
Yeah, the Bicentennial was coming up, Op-Sale was coming up, so that was a huge national event. So the planners said, well, what can we do? We can't develop the whole park here before the Bicentennial. So they decided they would do the south end. So they decided to create this lawn here, put up the flags, and the picnic area was done. I remember watching those sycamore trees over there being planted to create this little place where people could sit and have their lunch. And a temporary office was done. So it was focused right on this area. That was part of the original plan, and to me, that's one of the spectacular parts about the park. I mean,
Right.
to me, that rises Liberty Park to a national significance. Right up there with Fairmount Park or Mission Park in San Francisco, or the great parks in America, where you have this promenade where you're looking at Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, and the Hudson River, and the Verrazano Bridge. I mean, what else could match that?
Right.
At my level in government, I would not have been involved in this. This would have been done by a consultant or somebody else. But since I was here, being first is an advantage, because people say, "Oh, this guy's he's here already. We'll talk to him." So I got to go to the meetings and participate in the planning meetings, so they let me go. So I became very interested in it. I learned a lot from this. I've actually seen this in other places across the country, in other parks, where this was not a growing area. And I think I read right now, Hudson County is the #1 growing county in New Jersey for people immigrating into Hudson County. And this park has been the engine for that. I think one of my favorite John Muir quotes is that we all need beauty, as we need bread, places to pray in and to play in. And I think this added that whole dimension to Hudson County, which it did not have. And now it does. I mean, just look at these people. I mean, we're surrounded by people everywhere. And that's the fun of park work. If you're a guy like me and you do a project, and then you come back and you see what's happened, that the vision it's not exactly as I would have done, I would say, but the vision has reached millions of people, I think, Sam. I think it's a wonderful feeling for me to come back to this. I love what's happened. I love what the Friends have done and what you have done, and not giving up and not giving in to what the vision was, what Richard Sullivan talked about that day on the pier down here. And anybody who looks at this now would have to say, looking at all the people and what's happened so far and what is to come, would have to say this was a great idea. This was a great idea. America's best idea, but on a state level. And I think you should be very proud of what you've done here.
Who's Park? Who's Park?
What was your first impression when you first walked into the 1889 terminal? So you were started around 1969. I think the company left around 67.
They walked out. They left railroad cars, their tools, which was great for the park people because we got a lot of tools and things that we could use, which is how park people think, we'll scrounge some stuff. Yeah, I remember going into the terminal building, and there was about an inch of ice on the floor, I think maybe the first time. It was falling apart. And we went through the whole building. It's a huge building upstairs. But one of the things that was a surprise, we went upstairs, and one day we find this pile of paper. It was the original plans for the 1889 building, which we saved. And I think they were helpful in restoration of the building. But I remember being there when we found those plans. They were way up in the very top, stuck in a closet. And those original plans were still there. So we were very happy about that. So, and the movie Funny Girl had just finished. They had filmed that. And Leon Wilbur had been there doing that. I wasn't part of that. That was a little before my time. But they had done some work to fix up where the tracks were. The 24 tracks, they had done some work there to make it nice for the movie. And I remember the McAllister Tugboat Company, because I used to be over there all the time because they were right up by the terminal building. And when I saw the movie Funny Girl, here's McAllister's Tugboat, which he had named after his daughters, going up with Barbra Streisand singing from the front of the tugboat. So, that was one of the memories. The boat ramp idea, that was my idea, actually. I don't want to take too much credit here, but I was a boater and a fisherman, and I had fished in the Hudson River, when I was at Cheesequake. And I thought, well, we don't really have access for the water. That'd be kind of a neat thing to do. And it wasn't in the plan, but I guess, I'm not sure who decided that we would actually do it, but that was something that I thought it would be worth doing, to give people access to recreating on the water, which I think has worked out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And the fishing actually here is very good. One of the projects, other thing I was involved with was the canvasback wintering population was very significant in order to protect the park. And I remember the Department of Commerce said, if you fill in the marsh in North Cove, we are not going to give you any federal money for the project. So they basically threatened the state. And I was just involved in those meetings because I thought the waterfowl were so important. So they hired Texas Instruments to do a biological assessment, which you've probably seen, 1976, the Liberty State Park biological assessment of Liberty State Park. And it was all along the waterfront. They brought in a large boat. We were over in Cave and Cove, Saming, and it was full of life. There were juvenile striped bass and tomcod and lots of clams, and the grasslands were full of mice and pheasants. And so they did a really good documentation. And I think this is true, that absent that data, and we're always looking for data, that I think the marsh would have been filled in for sure, and the North Cove would have been filled in for sure. And I think the focus on the wildlife was supported by research, actually research. So I would credit Texas Instruments. And I also remember the Corps of Engineers was involved in the original surveys along the waterfront. And there was a concern that if we put this promenade here, it may affect the navigation of the Hudson River. So they decided they would go to the Corps of Engineers. Well, the Corps of Engineers was involved. They set up a model in Vicksburg where the Corps of Engineers has a model where they can model tidal currents. And they set up a model of the whole harbor here to see what the development plans would do to navigation in the Hudson River. So there was a lot of aspects to the early planning of it that nobody knows about, that I just happened to be here and be at the meetings when I could see that this was happening. So some really good background research work was done. There was no documentation or data on what was sustaining this huge canvasback duck populations, which are in decline, and redhead ducks. And they were over here in Cave and Cove. So we need some way to connect the habitat to these wintering waterfowl. And that's one of the roles that the Texas Instrument biological assessment was able to do, is they were able to actually document the quality of the habitat. And if you looked at it, you wouldn't think of it. Well, it's New York Harbor, how good could it be? But it was, this cove is paved with clams, which the canvasbacks like, and polychaete worms, these little red worms that are in the mud. And the canvasbacks just were doing great. They were down here by the thousands.
Have you seen the plans for the interior, the habitats creation that have been in the works for 20 years now? There's funding to natural resource damage funding to move that forward, I think, from the Exxon settlement. So in the interior, there will be 165 acres of habitats, about 50 acres of free active recreation. But the habitats, as Sean Luttrell described, are flood resiliency, science-based habitats. There's going to be a channel of the Hudson River going into the North Cove.
I love that idea. I think that as a salt marsh guy, the idea of having this estuary come right into the park, I mean, we have the tidal marsh here, but to have the estuary coming right in where the wildlife can come right up to the visitors, I think that's a terrific idea. You're looking at an urban park, you're probably not thinking of wildlife. You're not thinking of particularly waterfowl, because you don't expect to see it here. So I think the nature center has been important. The trails, I think the estuary is a great idea. Preserving the marsh, I think, is important. And mixing it all and having the proper balance and not covering the park with a lot of facilities. I think keeping as much of it open as we possibly can I think is a direction I would want to see us go, which is more like what a national park would do. They are very, very careful about impacting the resource, because what is here? There's cultural resources and there's natural resources. That's really what the park theme I'd like could be, and you have that. I think of all the things I ever did, I think this is the thing I'm most proud of, to see how it's not because of me, but because of what's happened here, because of the coalescing of so many voices that were led by an everyday citizen who turned the tide and protected the park. And my role was a small role in it, but I'm glad that I had a chance to see it from the beginning and see what's happened with it. I feel really happy about it.
Did you, just to end with, did you have any memories of opening day itself?
I don't. I remember bringing helicopters into Cheesequake, picking up the flags, because you couldn't drive here. The roads were all blocked. And the tremendous crowds that were here. And I remember there was a platform out here, and I think it was Brendan Byrne was the governor then, and the Port Authority flew a helicopter right over top of him as he was speaking. And they were frantically running around trying to get this Port Authority helicopter to stop flying over top the ceremony. But I guess maybe that's my memory, which is probably not the best memory. But yeah, at that point when the park opened, then I knew that the future was, I thought it was going to be secure because the governor was personally involved with it. It was a huge event. Thousands of people were here. But it was not easy, Sam, as you know. You know, it took a lot of people, and it took leaders, and it took courage.